turn it over to our two hosts, Kathy and Dan.
Which means we're going to hand it over to Dan because I think he is the most familiar with our advertised topics, and he's going to skip out on us partway through. So go for it, Dan. And I'll stay quiet, believe it or not.
I know many of us know each other as well, but also if you could take a second and introduce yourself in the chat, just so everyone does have a sense of where everybody is.
Yeah, I see the list of topics. Sorry, I see the list of questions. I'm not sure what we advertised as topics.
So you had suggested the kind of online labs or
online video, perhaps, or labs.
Videos, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm actually. Hey, Gordon. Yeah. Vince. Hey, cool. Cindy, it's quite the crowd. Yeah. So I'm actually working on a manuscript right now about using Flipgrid. And so I've been showing this around. I'm actually highly pleased with myself. As you may know, I've been interested in student video for some time, mostly in having students produce the video and describe things. So I've continued having my students do that during the pandemic. And there are wonderful online editors that are free that students can share video and work with. They can open up screens on their own machines and look at. Filmora is one that's free. That's a noteworthy one. But the students are, my students are making videos remotely across multiple locations and exchanging video back and forth. And they're not doing too badly with that. But first of all, I want to show you. Using Flipgrid. I've been using Flipgrid with the students, so I'm hoping I can share screens here. I can. Cool. So let me share a screen here and fire this up. Okay, so I'm hoping I just shared like a Google browser window with you. So here. So I've been using Flipgrid. It's a free service. It allows students to easily make videos with their phones. So there's a flavor of it for Android. There's a flavor of it for iOS, and you can in fact make videos with a laptop with it too. And what happens in my world, I am held fairly. What I do with my students is frequently comment a source of commentary from my colleagues, because I do weird things and I'm the education guy. So I try to find stuff that I can do. Whoops, that's not the button I wanted to click on. That's the one. And what did we get? Okay, figured out who I was. Okay, so what happens is ordinarily, when I teach live, I give a Friday afternoon quiz. It makes all the students show up. It gives them something to do in the last, 15 minutes of class. And sometimes I've experimented with what I call group quizzes, where they would have maybe one quiz and 3 they could solve together as a group, and then file their own solutions on paper. So when we went to pandemic, not being present, I had to do something with these quizzes that I had them doing in the past. So what I wound up doing is I wound up putting the quizzes online as Flipgrid quizzes. So they start out the semester, they have to post a little video introducing themselves. This video is open throughout the semester. They have a script. I make them read their names. I make them hold up a piece of paper with their names on it to make sure they get their cameras flipped correctly. That turns out to be a major issue with these. So they each introduce themselves, say a few words about their background, their hometown, and I actually get them because I have a widely varied group of students in terms of their ethnic background, and usually they're almost 70% the children of immigrants, sons and daughters of immigrants. So I asked them to talk about how many languages, what other languages do you speak is a common thing. So these are their Friday quizzes. And on the midterms, they also have midterm questions that they wind up doing online. And what's kind of neat too is my students are extraordinarily diverse, and I am not. I'm a pasty white bald guy with a beard who looks like pretty much every other physics professor in the department. I can actually do questions with them, quizzes with them that are introduced by, for instance, Chandra. So here's an example of a quiz that I gave, introduced by Chandra. So this is Chandra's problem. It's a problem on angular momentum. I don't know if you've seen this little bit of video. This is our past president. She talks about a particular problem that I then assigned to the students to have them do their own solutions and hand it in. So I'll show you her setup for this thing. I guess I'll have to expand it.
In physics courses, we don't just want
You got
students
the
to
audio,
learn the
yes?
laws of physics, but also how to think like a physicist. But what does it mean to think like a physicist? It's a difficult thing to analyze because you have to give the same problems to physics faculty and students and ask them to solve it. But most problems are either too difficult for students or too easy for faculty. However, there are a few problems in which professors don't have any intuition about how to solve them, so they have to think on their feet to solve these problems. Here is one of them. You have a spinning wheel that spins for some time and then falls on the ground, and then it slips for some time and then starts to roll. The question is, how does the final speed of the wheel depend upon the friction on the surface? Turns out the correct answer is the final speed does not depend upon friction. So it doesn't matter whether the surface is rough or smooth. Since professors don't have any intuition about how to solve this problem, we gave to 20 physics professors and a lot of introductory physics students this problem and asked them to think aloud as they solved it. We found that professors indeed knew how to solve these problems in the sense that they used a systematic approach, analyzed the problem conceptually, and thought about the physics principles involved. They thought about limiting cases. They even thought about how to draw analogies with familiar situations. For example, what happens to the wheels of an airplane when it lands? How does the friction determine the final speed at which it rolls? These are all great heuristics that most students didn't really think about. So here is the big challenge in education. How do we get students to learn not just the physics concepts, but also effective problem solving and reasoning skills? Because if we teach students how to think like a physicist, they are going to be able to solve diverse problems in the future in unfamiliar complex situations, whether they are in physics or not. Thank you.
Okay, so it's very cool to have Chandra give a problem, and Chandra is a woman of color. We have no women of color in our department. We have no women in our department who are tenured or tenure track for that matter. So, and it's a wonderful problem for introductory physics. I also let the students all know that, if you want to speak to the world's leading expert on teaching and learning quantum mechanics, you would go to work for her. And that's a valuable thing. But in this case, she has laid out a problem that winds up being the quiz problem. I guess I got to go back here. Yeah. So this is, in this case, the problem was laid out here. And here they're given the details of what they're going to solve. To Professor Chandra's problem, freely rotating wheel. In this case, they were all given the same numbers. Okay, and this is kind of unusual, where they're given a mass, a radius, given initial rotation, and here they're given a lot of structure. My students are generally haven't had high school physics, and this is a freshman course for non-majors. But they are pushed through all of the trig algebra physics. So they're given a lot of structure for it. And yeah, And there's actually usually a separate document with a problem statement. Yeah, here it is. A separate page. This one was given last semester before Thanksgiving. Then what happens is the students record their responses. I usually open up a group chat window I open up breakout rooms. Thank you. I open up breakout rooms. The students may freely choose where they go, which breakout room they choose to work with. Usually what happens is they have a problem that is defined and they set up the equations for everybody, but then each one of them uses their own date of birth, like DD 1 to 31 of the day of their month that they were born in, or MM 1 to 12, or YYYY, what might be the mass of one of the vehicles. So they will each have a semi random independent number that they must report on. But then what happens is they have, in this case, they had until 5 o'clock. And so Friday afternoons, this was actually the last class of the day. So it was kind of nice because they kind of hung out and they really gelled. They really sat in their groups, talked this over, figured out what it meant to do this problem. They had 20 minutes to half an hour to do that. And then they went away and recorded Flipgrid. I have this thing set to record like something between a 1 and a 3 minute video. Usually 90 seconds is typical. So we can grab a video here and look at it. I'm trying to see, okay, here's one that was selected because it was a good one. So this one is displayed to, oh no, actually that's not the case. There'd be a grade here if it was selected to be a good one, but there's usually one that's selected not to be hidden. Ooh, that's bad. These are all hidden. Yeah, let's see what Pasquale did. Anyway, so.
Here's my sketch of the wheel in the air. Initial angular velocity, and then it drops, bounces around, starts to roll. Your final angular velocity and your sideways linear velocity vector going this direction. There.
So they do it on pieces of paper or on whiteboards.
Equations for angular momentum here with your quotient. Your equation for your initial rotational kinetic energy there, 1/2 I omega initial squared, given your quotient. And your linear velocity equals rotational velocity times radius, which you can see here. V equals R omega. Here's some conversions for angular or moment of inertia and angular velocity there. And now equation of conserving angular momentum. There's your equation there with your algebra done, giving you to solve for omega final divided by 2. We got 5.25 rads per second for your final angular velocity. Kinetic energy. Final rotational kinetic energy, 1/2 I omega final squared is 25.84 joules. Your final linear kinetic energy, 1/2 mv squared, 25.35 joules. Finding the final velocity, you needed that too, did that right there. Your initial kinetic energy, which we found before, and it's compared. How is it compared? We found out how much was lost, which we found here, losing half the kinetic energy.
So yeah, so basically this is their quiz. And in this case, it looks like they had 2 minutes to solve it. And some of them, some of my students can speak without breathing for 2 minutes solid. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing lately. I've been doing these online quizzes, and my students have been doing them. Generally, what happens is for each one, sometimes we actually have buggies rolling around and they collect data from them. Here's one that here's one based on Alan Shepard hitting the golf ball on the moon, and how long the hang time was, and trying to figure out what was going on during their projectile motion. And this one also has the forest moon end where G is minus 9.81 meters per second squared. times 0.45 plus 0.mm, where mm is the month of their birth. So the students there have an individual number is pretty typical. And they do take time sitting down and working on these together. So I think it's done a lot to put them in a shared stressful environment where they learn to work together, because otherwise they won't. My students don't have to turn on their cameras when they come to class, and they usually don't. But when they're put in these small groups and they're looking at each other's papers and talking, they really do gel. They try to explain things to one another. And their grade is on the line by like 5 o'clock that day. They have to record a video, 2-minute video where they're explaining it, and their answers aren't going to look like everyone else in their group. So yeah, so this is kind of what I've been doing, this kind of stand and deliver using Flipgrid. And right now, their last problem was ultra centrifuges. So we just finished off the midterm grade and then did ultra centrifuges. So some of the videos are a 50 plus DD kilogram sine. So this is very classic kind of a problem. And there's a bar under compression and a cable under tension. They do very simple stuff. I'd be delighted to entertain any questions or comments. Cindy, did you have something?
Yeah, I had a question.
Go for it.
So first of all, in order to use this, do you have to make an account? Do you have to make accounts for them? Do they just go in and make their own accounts? I mean, how much management is involved in this?
They make their own accounts and they're free.
Okay.
The only downer here is that Microsoft bought it halfway through last semester, which really I'm not a fan of Microsoft now. It's they're not monetizing a hate like Facebook, but when I bought the product, when I started this, they were not owned by Microsoft. But nonetheless, the accounts are free. You can set it up. There's a code that you give, a join code. You actually see it here. The join codes for individual quizzes, or you can just use the join code for the class. And
how did you get the join code?
Well, in this case, if I want the join code just for this activity, I click on this and it produces it. Sorry, as an instructor, if I click on the join code, it throws me in as if I was a student. It does some things a little weird. I guess if I go up here to share, it gives me the join code that is for the thing. Their video looks a little different. So that's a copy for the join code for this, and I can cut and paste that, for instance, into a chat box or put it into Blackboard. The class itself has a join code. And I can set it such that the only people that can log in are people that have Buffalo State IDs or Google IDs. So most of them come in as Buffalo State students. Some few do as Google students, and I can lock it down afterwards and say no more if I choose to. And I think I did for both of these classes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not, for me, setting up Pivot Interactives is a major pain in the rear end. Okay, this is much easier, I think, than that, although I'm using Pivot as well. So yeah, so this is my stand and deliver technique for my students. So if my colleagues ask, what are you doing there? And when they're all online, I could say, hey, you want to watch them solve a problem, or you want to watch them report a problem that they've solved? And it's kind of interesting.
I have one more question.
Go for it.
Do the students complain at all that this takes them more time? Because obviously to just write out a solution and email it to you or PDF it to you takes less time than to hold it up and explain it and do all that, although I think it's valuable. But I'm just curious whether any of the students have commented or complained that it takes longer and they're not happy. Just curious.
I have not had students complain that it took longer. I have had students complain that they don't want to be on video. Okay. And I tell them they have no choice for the introduction. And what happens is on the videos, after, let me see here. So this is supporting a hanging sign. So these things, see the red staying hidden? This means that they cannot see each other's videos. Usually in here, I will talk to a couple of students who got a 10 out of 10 and ask them if I can share their videos. So they have a solution, a full solution, which involves a spreadsheet because it's got all the different days of the month in it, right? So they have access to that through the bulletin board, Blackboard LMS system. But they usually just have access to their own video and to the one video that I've shared from the class, and sometimes two. Yeah,
Thanks.
I don't believe I've shared any of the exam questions. Yeah, and I mean, sometimes there's videos that are related. Sometimes there are videos they actually have to take data from, and then sometimes there's it's just, you know, me drawing stuff. You can grade them in here. It takes me about 90 seconds. Well, it takes me as long to grade it as it does to watch the video. So I can grade while they talk. I grade very simply out of 5. There are numbers I'm looking for, and I'm going to whack them if they, you know, don't follow sig figs or didn't particular diagrams. And yeah.
So I have
what
a
it
question.
is. Go for it.
So what was the at the beginning of the semester when students were first presented with this, what was the kind of the adoption phase on the student side? Meaning, how quickly did they get into making the videos? Did you make a sample of video solving a problem to kind of give them an example of the things that you were looking for? You know, what was kind of the beginning stage of this, of their own development, not just with the physics, but also with the platform and presenting material like this to you?
Well, the platform has got stuff on it showing you how to use it, and I'm not going to compete with them over that. They were expected to do a class introduction, which is still being shared across the class. A couple of reds here from people that have dropped the course. But they had a class video which they're expected to kind of ape me in my introduction, and then there's kind of a list here of what I'm looking for in there, and then this is the video that I recorded.
Hi, and welcome to my class introduction video.
Bring it.
My full name is Dan MacIsaac, and you say it MacIsaac. It means son of Isaac, like McDonald means son of Donald. And
So yeah, so I blither on, and I'm showing the sign to make sure you got it right. What else do we have here? We have oh yeah, there is also a practice quiz. They didn't have to do the practice quiz, and they had extra time for it. And so sometimes, you know, if they beg me for time, I might give them. In this case, I've been giving them till midnight. If they don't want to do it by 5. And the reason for that is because I have a morning and an afternoon class. Anyway, things got complicated. So the practice quiz is actually it's optional. They don't have to do it. But if they do it, I will score it, and I will use it to replace the lowest grade. So that's kind of what I did. That I did show them, with the permission of people from the previous semester, I showed them some of the previous videos. And in fact, when I write this up, I have permission from some of the students to share some of their quizzes. And what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to prepare something like a video vignette showing you how to do this, which is going to have 1 or 2 of their solutions in there. But they will be, you know, amongst the very best students who are the most articulate and get 10s. I'm not going to show anyone in a poor light.
So there's a lot of people here, and a lot of really smart people here. I'm curious if anyone else has attempted to do, you know, video responses with their students.
Well, I can say I've been in communication with Mark, but you know, I'm Mark Moverman from Washington, D.C. And every year, you know, we've been, for many years at the Lab School of Washington, we've been doing egg drop competition. And I've had for many years, the students, you know, have done videos anyways. Started off a long time ago with videotape, where I had to video everybody and I did the editing for them and all that. And they just had to be ready to present. But over the years, they've picked up more and more. And, you know, it's got, at some point I realized that they all knew some rudimentary editing, you know, so I said, hey, you know, you guys edit it yourself now. And I gave them the video. And then they said, well, as long as we're editing it ourselves, we just as soon take our own video. So it got to, that's even better, you know, because it's less work for me. So, but ultimately, yeah. So, you know, normally we have an event at school and we have video from there and they put it all together, but, and produce a video that explains what they did. But this year, because of the pandemic, we couldn't have a live event like that. And so, but yet at the same time, looking for ways of having community events that we've tried to do. So, so we had a virtual egg drop this year and the students had to drop it. So they did their normal videos, but they also had to drop it and film it at home and put it together. And then I produced a condensed version because they all, you know, they only can use toothpicks and glue. So they, there's actual, like you have to actually do physics. You can't just throw it in bubble wrap and throw it off. So, so they have to really explain what they're doing. And so this year, you know, so I produced, like I said, I cut their videos down to really make it more entertaining for the entire community. And so produced this 15-minute video and had, you know, the whole school was there. And then we had a live awards presentation afterwards, you know, it was all through Zoom. And it went over really well. So, so, you know, something like that, you know, I think the whole idea of involving the community in it was something that everybody appreciated at the school too. Students.
I did this particular semester, we went on 8-week blocks this past year. So actually my general physics course is completely done now for the semester. But having been in COVID in the fall, usually give a comprehensive final exam, and that went so horribly this year because everybody was virtual. They cheated their little butts off. And I was so disappointed in grading that I changed that for the spring and implemented a project final, which was a video project where I broke the course down into, I think I had 75 different topics that they could choose from. And so everybody had their own individualized topic, and they had to generate a video of that concept, explaining the concept, which included live laboratory footage of the concept, showing that it worked. You know, optics, for example, you know, here's the mirror and lens equation, you know, and so they would show setting it up on an optics bench, you know, that the numbers worked out correctly, you know, that it was a real effect and not just some made up thing that was fantasy from the definitions and the equations in the book, or, you know, or from me, you know, they could prove it. And so I had them completely replace the comprehensive final with this project, and they were given no instructions on their video other than it had to be a contiguous video, that it had to include sample calculations. It had to include, you know, them doing the voiceover. Didn't necessarily need to see their faces, but it had to be their voice and their handwriting. They could not use any images or figures or diagrams or anything off of the internet that was not purely of their own creation. And in fact, it worked out beautifully. Some were, you know, obviously not as into it as others, but for those that were, worked out beautifully. I don't feel like I spent any more or less time grading that, going over those videos and the corresponding paper they turned in, than I did, you know, grading a comprehensive final. And this way, I felt it was a much more authentic and unique activity. They each learned a very detailed information about their topic. And I had given enough assessments throughout the semester that I didn't feel like, abandoning a comprehensive final was detrimental to my understanding that they knew what was going on in the course. So having done that, I feel like that's something I plan to continue on doing and refining. I took probably 4 pages of notes, having watched their videos on things I'm going to change and do differently. But overall, it was a wonderful process. And so I think that video lesson idea was just an exceptional change from what I had been doing.
So something I guess I could throw in. So as some of you know, I have 1 foot in physics and 1 foot in engineering, and this semester has been a lot of foot in engineering. So designing a project-based class, the class has been going on for 20 some years, where students work in teams to, build, design, test something. We had to totally replace it with something that we could do completely remotely. And so we had to figure out how students could build things in their dorm rooms with limited access to tools and things and materials, and then how they would show them off to us through their cameras. It has gone surprisingly well. So it turns out they can build things out of cereal boxes, and we ended up buying a kit for all of them and having them pick up or mailing to them these kits, so that helped. But a combination of getting them to periodically, hold up their latest creations to us and talk us through them, and sometimes supplement that with some videos that they've taken in advance, and to get them in the habit of talking to us about that. And one of the pieces that we were most worried about, that I haven't heard come into the conversation here yet, because this was a group project, and sometimes even when you have them all in the classroom together, it's very difficult to be quite sure whether everybody's doing their share. I mean, you get a pretty good feeling when this is the primary thing they're working on, but we thought, if they're all in different places and we're not in the classroom with them, and how will we know whether people are doing their share? So a friend of mine found something that's being used in industry called a 4-blocker. I don't know if any of you are familiar with these or not, but you can Google it, and there's a lot of different formats for them that come up. So basically, you just have everybody make a PowerPoint slide. We had a template for them with 4 quadrants, and then they put a couple of highlights for each of the quadrants from their past week in there. So for us, it was, what were the highlights of your week? What were the lowlights of your week? What are your next steps? And then for us, especially teaching engineering, we loved this quadrant called risks and mitigations. So what are some of the risks based on the decisions you're making right now, and what steps you're going to take to mitigate them? And that has been amazing. So you can very quickly get a handle on who is not doing their share, who is hogging the work, which is of course just as big of a problem. Also, sort of, you get a pretty good feeling for how they're choosing to distribute the work on a group project, and you can sometimes head off things where you say, excuse me, if the same person is doing all of the coding and all of the hardware, and she's in Seattle, what are you going to do when she needs some of your hardware and you're in Columbus? So questions like that. So I'm a huge fan of these 4 blockers, and I guess if people are interested, we're in the process of arranging a virtual showcase / extended poster session, essentially, for these students coming up in a couple of weeks. And we're going to run it through a combination of a website and a series of Zoom rooms. So we can report back on the success, or either a huge number of Zoom bombers or whatever happens. But we think we're going to avoid that. But yeah, I've been really happy with the TAs and the faculty I've been working with, coming up with solutions for how we could do a group hands-on project and kind of keep tabs on what the students are doing. What other cool stuff have people been up to?
Actually, I have a question for you, Kathy. One of the things that that Dan brought up, or that Mark brought up, about sharing with the broader community and things like that. As you work on your little poster session for your engineering students, have you considered or put in place some way of inviting a larger group to participate in a poster session? Kind of like in a poster session, you would get kind of the random person that would walk through the engineering building that would catch it, right? So is there some way that you've thought about involving the random drop-in person?
Yeah, so actually, right, normally we're all about that. And this year we've heard so many terrible stories about Zoom bombing that we're also not sure how many people we can support, right? You know, with 4 Zoom rooms, maybe, you know, so what we're doing is we're putting together an invitation for students to send to their friends and family with, you know, a form that they're going to fill out, and then we're going to email them all the link so that we know who's coming in, and we're going to have a waiting room and all of that. So we actually have to scale back our usual advertising for the event that we'd be having at this time, just because we don't know if we can handle the number of people we might get, and we feel obligated to kind of try to protect our students' experience here. So yeah, we had somebody ready to like start making us posters and stuff, and we said, you know, so I don't know if we're being overly cautious. That's not usually something that I'm accused of, but that's kind of where we are, which, you know, is a shame. I mean, we're inviting people from outside the university to come in and be judges and stuff, but it's pretty directed communication this year.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't thinking of scale, you know, at your institution.
Yeah.
The number of students involved with a single class could be kind of big. So yeah,
we're small this year. It's only about 160 students that are, you know, only 40 teams. So, but yeah.
So I haven't experimented with kind of pre-recorded videos, but the general trend that I was seeing was that students seem to like office hours virtually and coming in, and people were getting more time in office hours. So I turned that in actually to kind of video assessments where I'd have a quick 90-second conversation, live conversation with students about a topic. And that's been very interesting as well. And the topic is agreed upon ahead of time, so the students know the question I'm going to ask them. They can prepare notes. They're ready to have the conversation. But it's been an interesting experience, and I'm learning a lot from those very short little conversations with my students about what they know and what they don't know. Has anyone experimented with, you know, more live conversations rather than pre-recorded videos?
I teach synchronously all the time, and I kind of jumped in late, so I wasn't too sure what exactly you guys mean by live versus pre-recorded. Like, do you guys mean that you record your lectures and the students consume them asynchronously?
No. So the Dan MacIsaac was the first host presenter, and he was talking about how he uses Flipgrid, and he poses questions to his students, and then they respond to those questions with a video that they produce themselves. So that's what I meant by pre-recorded, was pre-recorded material from the student side answering a question.
Okay. That makes more sense. Cool. I haven't been doing that. The students here aren't really big on being on camera at all, so we don't push them. If they speak to us, chat, we're happy.
That's something just in general, are people finding, or maybe even over the course of the pandemic, are fewer and fewer students willing to have their cameras on?
I mean, I can speak only for me, but I find that I have less and less students putting the camera on at the beginning of class for when I'm talking. But as soon as I put them into breakout rooms to talk with each other, the cameras all come on. And so I'll take that You know, I think it's more important they have their cameras on when they're talking to each other. And then if I go into the breakout room to talk with them, they don't turn their cameras off. So that's also a win. But I guess I'd be really interested though in knowing if people have been particularly successful in having them have their cameras on most of the time without you having to nag them. What do you do to make that go?
Cindy?
I can say that last semester I taught intro physics, and I was fortunate I had 2 sections, both with only 12 students. So they had the cameras on all the time. Nobody ever turned them off. This semester I have, because they knew it was more interactive with me because it was a smaller group. I also still broke them out into breakout groups when they had their, obviously had their cameras on. This semester I'm teaching classical mechanics, and I have 21 students in kind of like a lecture-y kind of thing, but it's a little interactive. And then I've broken them into recitation groups. During the session where there's 21 students, I'm finding as the semester goes on, more and more of them are not putting their cameras on for that. They are absolutely putting them on during the recitation sections. So I have no idea why in the last 3 weeks or so, more of them are just refusing to put their cameras on in the more lecture-y, less interactive, but still a little interactive. I have no idea why. Maybe it's the size, maybe with 21, like they feel like they don't have to, whereas when it was 12, you know, if 10 had their cameras on and 2 didn't, it made them feel like they should. I don't know. I'm really confused.
Yeah, I think that the sociology of when students turn cameras on is going to be fuel for the sociologists for years.
I have something similar where I don't usually mind whether my students have the camera on, and it's not something that I police. We generally encourage them, but I teach labs, and when I try to do poll questions, or what would be like a clicker question, because ours, we repeat the lectures multiple times every week and no attendance is required at any one, I get students that just leave the moment I try to do a poll question. They'll just quit rather than participate in the poll, even though the polls aren't worth any points. Does this sound something? I mean, is this a similar thing to not wanting to be on camera or not wanting to engage when it isn't strictly necessary?
For me, I feel like the students never want to be wrong. I teach K-12, so it's a different situation, right? But so I do Pear Deck, which I don't know if you're familiar with. It's more childish, I suppose. But so they trust that because I never show their names, and they've seen it hundreds of times, and they finally started doing it. But when I do like a Google Meet poll, they're like paranoid that someone will know their response, and they'd rather like die than anyone know that they were ever wrong. And then I think sometimes they don't want to disappoint me. So if they feel unsure, they just ghost the poll rather than admit that they're confused. Which I don't mind. I'm like, yes, please be wrong, so we have something to talk about. But they're like, no, then you'll think like that you're, I don't know. I'm like, it's probably me. Like the reason why you're getting it wrong is because of me, not you. So tell me.
I think one of the things to remember, and it's hard because I don't know about you, but I think this has been the case with everybody I've talked with, right? Everything takes longer online, right? So you're trying to like get through the stuff, right? You still want to be interactive and ask these questions. But I found that if I want my students to really engage with me on a question, and I really want them to think about it and give me a good response, and I can get that feedback from them, I need to send them into breakout rooms first to talk about it with each other in a smaller group before I can collect their opinion, right? Which is exactly what I do in the lecture hall, except it would be quicker, right? I just say, turn to your neighbor. And so I think when you think about the fact that that's best practices when we're all together in the same room, right, to give them that security. Now they're in a room where they really don't know anybody else, right? If you're online, I think it's even more important. So then you have to figure out how are you going to trim your time somewhere else if you want to do that. I'm not saying it will necessarily work, but I think that that's part of the psychology going on. In our Southern Ohio AAPT meeting a couple of weeks ago, a teacher from Mason High School named Laura Shepard actually shared a way that she is pulling her students by having them hold up colored cards for different things that I thought was really pretty cool. And that was recorded and it's on our website. So I don't know that it's going to really fix Paul's question, but maybe the colored cards would be more fun. I don't know. So they could hide behind the color card. I don't know. I guess their name's still on their Zoom screen, but.
I forget the name of the technology, but there was our IT guy at the school that I work at had a similar thing where he was giving out cards, but they all had QR codes on them. And you, as the instructor, you could actually just point your camera at the screen and it would capture all the QR codes and essentially give you a poll. And it would say like, oh yeah, 5 people said this, 3 people said this, and so on. I'm forgetting the technology now, the name of it, but it was pretty cool. And it was, the cards had orientations somehow. So maybe it wasn't the normal QR code, but if you held the arrow up, it was like, A, if you turned it sideways, it was B, and so on. And so your device would just simply count the number of things. Oh,
Steve
plinkers.
says it's plinkers.
If I could just give this is a non-teacher perspective on the camera thing, and I'll just say, I mean, it's been an exhausting year. Being on Zoom all the time is exhausting, and having your face, a headshot of your face on, for everybody to see for an hour, times, the number of classes you're in all day, it's just exhausting. And maybe kids had the energy to do it early on and they're getting tired. They're done, and so, and it's not, I mean, I think, being in meetings all day as an adult, it's the same thing. It's exhausting. It's a lot different having your head, headshot up there than it is kind of sitting in a room with people. So it's not just students.
Yeah, and I teach at a school for kids with learning disabilities, and so sometimes they can have a little bit more emotional disability here and there too. And one thing is there seems to be an increase in social anxiety, and so I think the kids who are already kind of a little bit like that, they've really suffered through this, and so a lot of them are just off camera. Even in small classes, they're off camera. So they do, one of the things I find that they're willing to do is private chat me. So if there's a poll, or, sometimes I'll just ask, did you guys do your homework? And they'll private chat me and say, oh yeah, I did it and stuff.
I don't know, perhaps a reason for reluctance to go on Zoom or be seen with a camera on is that sometimes other students will take a screenshot and will share those screenshots on social media. I've heard of that happening here. And, there was no meanness or anything like that in it at all. But the students that had their cameras on then very quickly turned them off. I was involved in interviews last week we were interviewing for peer instructors, peer leaders for peer instruction next year. And what happened, one of the questions we asked them was, we were saying that there was trouble this year with people because stuff has been done online to turn cameras on. And what one of them said was, they said that the way one instructor got people around it, with probably a group, the 20 to 30 range of students, was to get everybody to count down, everybody microphones off, sort of cameras off, his camera included off, counted down from 30 and everybody turned them on at once. Apparently they did that for him all right. And some of them left it on afterwards. But what I'm finding, for instance, even in breakout rooms, students have the cameras off. But what I'm finding in breakout rooms, they're actually using the whiteboard and audio. So they're sharing a whiteboard and they're doing work together that way fairly well.
Yeah, I think that's awesome that they're using the whiteboard. We use Google Meet, so we don't have that same thing unless the kids want to make a Jamboard, which is clunky. I know since I teach high school, like a lot of my students, like if they're friends and they're in groups, which I try to put them together so they'll speak, they'll just be in Snapchat. So it's like they want to have a conversation without me. So they'll just like mute the Google Meet and they'll be in Snapchat. So I'll have students here that sit in the corner on Snapchat and do physics together because they feel more comfortable than me like showing up. And I don't care if they're doing work, whatever. But I think it's just like my presence. We're always listening, or like you guys said earlier, like someone's always watching. You know, there are all those viral TikToks where someone's like, "Oh, look at this person. Should I ask them out? They're in my college class." And you know, I would probably rather die than be a student and have that me be like the person in the background, not the focus, just like me in general. I don't even like being on camera. So I don't make my students turn on the camera as long as they do work, and I'm okay.
Hey, Mark, this is Jake. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I worked for Mr. Wizard for about 30 years. Excuse my voice. And we often discussed why this is so tiring to do the Zoom, but much less the studio work. And it's the old military thing of being put under long periods of complete boredom punctuated by a few seconds of high stress just wears you out terribly. You know, just so I sit here and listen, and then when the camera comes on me, my heartbeat goes up, my blood pressure goes up, and then when the camera goes off, it goes back down. That just wears a person out. So I thought I'd share that. It's like the military. We're going to battle in the Zoom, I guess. I don't know.
It has been like a war in some ways.
So I started the year off using, oh, now I can't even remember the name of the program for for messaging app, like, wow.
Remind?
A telephone?
No, just complete. I was about to say the word and it just disappeared. Anyway, Slack, there we go. I started the year off using Slack. And my school district actually started getting very concerned about so many external programs that kids had private information on, and they started to frown on students using Slack. And it was unfortunate because my students were really, really into it, and that they were using that very, very vigorously during class. You know, that was the main way that they were communicating with each other. And they found it to be a much richer experience than just the chat in Zoom or Google or things like that. And luckily, as the district was kind of clamping down on Slack, one of the CS teachers found a Slack clone called Mattermost, which is essentially the exact same thing as Slack, except you can install it on a local server and you can run it, and therefore you own all of the information as a school. And somehow that was acceptable. So we just installed it. It took like an hour, and we now run our own kind of completely closed off version of Slack that looks like Slack, feels like Slack, you know, does everything that does, but now is completely closed off. And the kids love it. And it's very interesting because you can do polls in it, and you can designate, when you do a poll, you can actually designate it as anonymous or not anonymous. And I always try to put anonymous in there, but they've learned that when they look at the title, if it doesn't say anonymous, then they don't answer it. And then if I change it to anonymous, then boom, they all answer it, because they know somehow that word in there, it gives them the comfort that it is actually an anonymous thing. It was called Mattermost, is the name of the company, and it was.
Thank you.
It was really, it's been a nice thing, and the fact that the school owns all the information made it much more palatable for the school district to not get worried about having private information from minors on it, or even the idea of communication between student and teacher that couldn't be monitored because of course it's all recorded and everything is saved and it sits there on the server forever now. So, but it's ours. So that apparently makes it okay.
So Mark, I'm guessing that one of the things that was really nice about that, one of the things that we don't get with Zoom is the fact that then you can comment in threads and it's there after the session is over and students can refer back to it.
Yep. Yeah,
So,
and I even I set up you can set up different channels, right? So there's kind of the in the flow of class channel, but then there's another one of, hey, I'm doing homework at home and I need some help channel that kids are now using that, and they're putting their questions in and they're collaborating kind of off hours. It's working pretty well. It is yet again kids staring at a screen, so it hasn't solved that issue. But you can even start inside of it. You can start your own Zoom meeting. You can start a Google Meet, things like that. So I see in looking kind of back through it, kids will have a question, at 10 p.m. and then I see that they jump into a Google Meet together and they answer the question and then it disappears. So that's also kind of interesting to see that they are becoming more fluent themselves with online meetings.
yeah, one of the people I teach in parallel with set up something similar for us in Microsoft Teams. And I remember at the beginning of the fall when I was trying to learn Zoom and I was trying to learn that, the things that I thought are things that I cannot repeat in public about my colleague for introducing yet another thing of technology. And now I'm super grateful that we did have something. We do very much like what you described. We have a channel that's during class for just any clarifications that we want, and so you have to kind of keep one eye on each chat, which is not the best, but then again you get the threading, so it's worth it. And then we have another channel for outside of class that anybody can just ask questions there, and students can answer each other anytime, which is also pretty cool when that works. But yeah. And I know some people use Discord as well for stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of options there to get that threading and that conversation to continue through, although hopefully we're mostly done with that, the need for that, fingers crossed. We started off talking about everybody's vaccines, right? So.
Well, actually, funny you should mention that, Kathy, because my experience is that we are actually, in fact, going to continue using our Discord channels, even after, well, all of our classes are face-to-face right now, more or less. At least any of the upper division major courses. And so what we decided to do was to actually survey our students on which platform they would actually like to use. And once they've decided that, we built it. So we've actually created all the things that you and Mark have been talking about with respect to the various different channels for the students for various different classes. And then we actually have designated channels for our student organizations within the department. We have a game night channel that the faculty jump in with the students so we can interact from time to time on just silly games and stuff like that. And then we actually did our full advising through Discord in a specific advising channel just this last week. And what we found was that everyone saw the benefits of having that 24/7 access for the students and the threads being continuously updated, that the students want to actually have this continue, the faculty wants to have this continue, and we're talking about possibly making all homework help hours or office hours by faculty be online moving forward after everything opens back up, because we can have more students interact with us instead of 5 people squeezed into an office that's not big enough for 5 people, and then there's a line down out the hall. So maybe I'll let you know how it all goes, but at least that's our bold plan moving forward.
Yeah, I'm thinking about continuing my office hours, even if I go back in the fall in person. I'm thinking about doing them on Zoom because they just seem to work out so much better. They're there, I'm there. We can do them at off times. I mean, if a student wants office hours on a Sunday afternoon at 5 o'clock. If I was in person, I wouldn't do it. But if I'm free, I will. So I'm actually thinking about keeping some of the aspects that worked super well last semester in my course when I go back in the fall in person. So I think that's great. Thanks, Vince. I got to run. So take care, everybody. I hope I'll see you at the virtual meeting. If it's virtual, we'll find out soon. Right, Beth?
Hasn't been announced yet, right?
Beth said next week, right, Beth? Take care.
And actually, as Cindy has to go, I say that we've had another hour of great conversation. And I don't mean to cut it off prematurely, but this seems like a reasonable time to say thank you and to wish you all good luck as you finish out your semesters, and be back 2 weeks from now for another AAPT coffee hour. So thanks again for coming. Thank you very much to our hosts, Dan and Kathy. I very much appreciate their help, and hope everyone has a great week.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Everybody.
Take care, folks.
Bye, Kathy. Thanks.
Thanks for coming, everyone.